There was a time when fantasy games felt like real events. Swords and magic, dragons and castles, all of that still hits, and this year is finally bringing some of that feeling back. In this video, we are looking at the top 20 new fantasy games of 2026, including some of the biggest fantasy RPGs and other major releases. What's up, guys? It's Broz, and here we go. Fantasy first-person games are rare right now, so Fatekeeper landed on a lot of wishlists fast. The comparison to Dark Messiah makes sense once the combat starts. Heavy swings, close-range magic, enemies that need to be read, and a world built around ruins, caverns, forests, relics, and very strange discoveries. Paraglacial has shown a lot already for such a small team. THQ Nordic said the studio is only 12 people, yet the game keeps getting regular devlogs. In February, they showed Haven, a home hub where you return after long trips into the wild. In March, they expanded on the Underdwellers and Solace. Then in April, they showed the skill tree, and that is where Fatekeeper started to look much more flexible than a basic sword and spell setup. One build freezes enemies and smashes them with blunt weapons. Another turns into a fire caster with ricocheting projectiles. Another goes all in on daggers with leaping attacks and a returning throw. And there is even a build around alchemy and consumables. The store page still says to be announced, while official THQ Nordic posts and Steam news keep repeating PC early access in 2026. Fable has long been one of the most recognizable fantasy series around, and a lot of people remember the older games for letting you cause total chaos and play as a saint, a menace, or something in between. This time, that idea works a little differently and revolves around reputation and how the world reacts to what you do. The big change is that Fable no longer runs on a simple good or evil bar. The team says your reputation grows out of actions that people actually witness. Kick enough chickens in one town, and you can become known there as a chicken chaser. The same applies to being generous, stealing, or having multiple spouses, and each settlement can judge those things its own way. Another strong detail is the NPC simulation. Ralph Fulton said Fable has over 1,000 persistent NPCs with jobs, routines, homes, and beds. And the team even had a town look empty because people lived too far from work and kept turning around before they got there. Playground is also keeping the series' tone intact with that dry British humor, weird creatures, melee combat, ranged weapons, magic, blacksmithing, property ownership, romance, and children. Fable is set to launch on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, and PC this autumn. Crimson Desert had to be here. Right now, this is one of the loudest fantasy releases of the year, and almost nobody seems neutral about it. Some players love it, praise it, and sink dozens of hours into the world, the combat, the bosses, and the amount of weird things packed into this game. Others drop it pretty quickly and walk away without ever really understanding what clicked for everyone else. Talking too much about the story does not get you very far anyway. Even after launch, a lot of the conversation kept circling back to the same thing. The real plot here was the recovery job Pearl Abyss pulled off in record time. Just over a day and a half after release, the studio openly admitted that the controls felt rough and that keyboard and mouse players got a weak version of the experience. Then the update started landing almost immediately, along with thousands of reviews and reactions all over social media. That pace changed the mood around the game fast, and Steam has already climbed to 83% positive reviews. The bottom line with Crimson Desert is pretty simple. This is one of those games you really have to try for yourself, because that is the only way to know if it is your thing or not. Phantom Blade Zero has looked strong through its whole development, and every new showing keeps landing for the same reasons. The visuals are rich, the animation has real snap, the swordplay moves like an old Asian action movie, and the whole world carries that thick mix of blood, steel, smoke, and dark fantasy. You play as Soul, a fighter framed for his master's death, and he has only 66 days left to live. S-Game is also packing the combat with real variety. The official pages list more than 30 weapons and over 20 phantom edges, meaning special combat techniques you can mix into your loadout. And some secondary weapons are tied to exploration too, opening cracked walls and old locked paths, so the maps have hidden spaces and reasons to backtrack. One side boss can even return later during the final battle if that earlier encounter plays out a certain way. In April, the studio clarified that there is no honor system, but side quests can still affect the direction of the main story, and it also said the game is already in the intense final stage of development. Phantom Blade Zero is set to release on September 9th for PS5 and PC. Solasta II had a pretty quiet early access launch, and after Baldur's Gate 3, nobody seriously expected it to kick the door down and become some giant genre event overnight. Tactical adventures kept the crunchy turn-based combat that made the first game worth playing, then pushed the presentation higher with better environments, stronger lighting, cleaner combat readability, and a voice cast that feels more alive this time. Positioning, line of sight, elevation, and spell use still carry the whole game, and that side of Solasta is exactly where people keep finding the fun. Steam sits around 77% positive, so the mood is closer to good base still early than full-blown hype. Early access currently gives you part of Act 1, a level cap of 4, 6 classes, 4 ancestries, and a world map that feels unfinished. Crafting is still missing for now. Some players are unhappy with performance, and the story also feels thin next to the combat systems. So yeah, the start was quiet, and some of the criticism is justified. When battles begin, Solasta II already feels solid. Outside those fights, it still feels like a framework waiting for more content. Lords of the Fallen 2 looks like CI Games took every bruise from the 2023 launch, kept the useful pain, and built the sequel around it. The first game spent more than 2 years getting hammered into shape through over 70 updates, and that history is all over the new pitch. Combat is faster now, meaner, and way more aggressive. Enemy variety is getting pushed hard, and the new footage leans straight into dismemberment, executions, and giant boss fights with zero hesitation. The setting jumps 1,000 years after Aedir's fall, with a human kingdom still stuck between the living world and Umbral, so that split realm identity is still the core fantasy here. CI Games is also promising full shared progression co-op this time, plus optional PvP, and that is a huge point after all the complaints around multiplayer in the previous game. PlayOn is handling physical distribution worldwide. The official site and Epic page are already live, and CI Games said in March that the sequel is planned for later this year on PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. This time, it looks like the studio already knows exactly where it got burned and is trying to arrive cleaner, harder, and much more prepared. The first 4 Heroes games were a huge part of my childhood, and I still could not tell you how many hours disappeared there. After that, the series lost a lot of its identity for me. Olden era did not fully win me over in the demo either, so I am keeping expectations under control. The old Heroes loop is easy to recognize here. You move across the map grabbing mines and resources, build towns, pass armies between heroes, and spend half the session doing quiet little calculations in your head before a fight. The launch build comes with 6 factions, the first act of the campaign, standalone scenarios, solo play, multiplayer, co-op, and map editor tools. For an early access strategy game, that is already a solid amount of content. So far, the response to the demo has been mixed, though it still leans more positive than negative overall. Players who enjoy it usually point to that slower, old-school pace, while the weaker reactions are mostly aimed at the presentation, the interface feel, and the overall smoothness. Early access starts on April 30th for PC, and it is also coming to PC Game Pass on day 1. It is hard to find a more ambitious vampire game in 2026 than the Blood of Dawnwalker. The game is set in 14th century Europe during war and plague, with a whole region called Vale Sangora built around human fear, vampire rule, and an eclipse hanging over everything. You play as Cohen, who is human by day and vampire by night, so the same character shifts between sword fighting, movement, feeding, and supernatural abilities depending on the time. Daytime pushes more grounded combat and direct danger, while nighttime opens faster traversal, wall running, claws, and blood hunger. One of the more interesting parts is how the quest structure is tied to time pressure. Your family does not have unlimited time. Bigger quest steps move the clock forward, and the world keeps changing depending on what you do and what you leave unfinished. The main vampire threat, Brentsis, is not just sitting in the background either, because the game already talks about his reactions, showing up through patrols, lockdowns, and other shifts across the map. There is also romance, faction tension, and a full open world built for replaying different choices. Capcom kept Onimusha silent for almost 20 years, and now it is coming back with Miyamoto Musashi walking through a cursed Kyoto drowned in malice. One of the sharpest details around this game is the face model. Capcom built this version of Musashi around legendary actor Toshiro Mifune, so the whole thing immediately carries old samurai cinema energy before you even get to the combat. The combat itself already looks like the real selling point. Issen is back, the classic counter that can delete enemies in one perfectly timed strike, and this time Capcom is leaning hard into parries, deflects, soul absorption, weapon variety, and brutal finishers. Musashi can also use environmental attacks, turning random objects around the arena into part of the fight. There is also a more personal duel setup than usual, since Sasaki Ganryu has his own Oni gauntlet, which should make those clashes feel very different from standard demon encounters. The useful thing for action fans is that Capcom keeps describing this game through blade clashes, tempo, and readability. Recent hands-on reports say it moves fast, looks clean in motion, and feels much more like a focused action game than some exhausting wall of punishment. Kina Scars of Kosmora showed up in February and instantly became one of the quieter surprises of the year. Ember Lab is finally returning to that world, and the sequel is taking Kina to a new island called Kosmora, a place with its own cultures, temples, buried history, and a much heavier personal angle for the main character. Kina is older now, already known as a spirit guide, and she arrives there looking for answers about the affliction she has lived with since childhood. The whole sequel turns on one brutal story detail. A powerful spirit shatters Kina's staff, and that is a disaster since the staff was also keeping her alive. To survive, she has to learn a forgotten form of spirit guiding built around alchemy and elemental power. The first Kina had that funny reputation where people came for the beautiful art and then got smacked by bosses harder than expected. Scars of Kosmora looks fully aware of that history and is leaning deeper into the action side, while Ember Lab is also talking about a larger world and more deliberate progression. It is set to launch this year on PS5 and PC, and so far there is no official word on an Xbox version. Mortal Shell 2 finally showed its hand properly in April, when Cold Symmetry dropped more than 11 minutes of new gameplay and made it clear that the sequel is going much bigger and much louder than the first game. The old Shell idea is still the core, so you are again jumping between warrior bodies with their own combat identity, but now the whole thing is built around faster pressure, heavier weapon customization, freer exploration, and a world that is still interconnected while feeling far less cramped than before. It is being pitched as a more unrestricted action RPG with deeper weapon design and a compact open world that respects the player's time. One detail that instantly changes the mood is the addition of medieval firearms, because this time you are not limited to cold steel and careful spacing. The recent footage already showed revolvers, nasty finishers, grotesque enemies, and bosses that feel more like a death march through a metal album cover than another polite Souls copy. The first Mortal Shell had a cult following because of its strange body swapping and oppressive tone. The sequel looks like it is trying to keep the same identity, while dropping a lot of the stiffness that made the first game feel smaller than its ideas. Dragon Quest VII Reimagined came out in February, and one of the main talking points was how much faster and cleaner this version moves than the older releases. The whole game still starts on Estard, where the world seems to be nothing but one lonely island, and then keeps unfolding through sealed lands, time travel, and that very Dragon Quest habit of turning every new region into its own little story. What changed in this version is the pacing. Enemies are visible on the field now, battle speed can be pushed up, weaker monsters can be deleted instantly before the fight even begins, and the new moonlighting system lets you level 2 vocations at the same time, which is a huge quality of life shift for a game that used to be famous for how long it could take to build a party. Square Enix also reworked the visual side into a diorama style, so the whole adventure looks more like a storybook world with toy-sized towns and bright, clean character work. Reception has been pretty strong overall. Steam is sitting at 88% positive. Most of the praise usually lands on the quality of life changes and how much easier it is to get into this version. Nioh 3 did not spend long proving it was a real hit, and just 2 weeks after release, it had already sold over 1 million copies worldwide and became the fastest-selling game in the series. Team Ninja pushed this one in a different direction by opening the structure up into large fields while keeping the same pressure, stamina management, and enemy threat that made the older games so tense. The biggest mechanical change is the instant switch between Samurai style and Ninja style. Samurai pushes direct weapon pressure, deflects, and heavier martial techniques, while Ninja goes much faster with aerial movement movement, dodges, ninjutsu tools, and a footstool jump that lets you hop off enemies and land behind them. Guardian spirits are also doing more than before, since they now help with traversal, combat abilities, and the living artifact system. One useful detail from the road to release is that Team Ninja published a full alpha feedback report with 90% positive overall reactions, then kept patching and tuning after launch, including fixes in April for style-specific issues and more usability work based on demo feedback. Monster Hunter Stories 3 came out in March, and Capcom pushed this series even further away from the usual loop of tracking monsters, carving materials, and crafting better gear. The story starts with two nations, Azuria and Vermeil, sliding toward disaster until an egg is found with a Rathalos inside, even though that species was believed extinct there. From that point, the game leans hard into politics, legends, and the bond between riders and monsters, but the more unusual shift is in how it wants you to play. The game is built around a news cycle focused on protecting monsters and preserving their ecosystem, with the player acting more like a ranger inside these habitats than a regular hunter smashing everything in sight. One reason it keeps getting attention is that it still gives you that creature collecting rush, but inside a proper RPG structure with turn-based battles, party members, story cutscenes, and a much softer visual style than the mainline Monster Hunter games. The reaction since launch has been good overall. On Steam, it sits at 86% positive in recent reviews, and 80% positive overall, while Metacritic currently has it at 86, which makes this a very successful launch for the series. Game Freak has been building Beast of Reincarnation for 6 years, and that already makes it one of the stranger fantasy bets of 2026, because this is the studio most people still tie first to Pokemon, and not to a hard-action RPG about a cursed girl and a dangerous white dog crossing a ruined Japan in the year 4026. Emma fights in real time with a katana, while Ku works through commands that slow combat down and let you pick support actions more like a turn-based RPG. The game keeps stressing that blend every time it talks about combat, and one of the more useful details is that Emma's parries are what fuel Ku's skills, so the whole system is built around rhythm between direct action and brief tactical pauses. The world also has a strong identity already. Blight can suddenly transform wasteland into dense forest. Giant Nushi rule these corrupted zones. Emma carries the role of a sealer who absorbs that corruption into her own body. And one of the strangest rules in this world is a warning repeated by the developers themselves. Never look up at the sky, as if there is something up there that local legend says people should never try to witness with their own eyes. Outward 2 is still doing that rare thing where the game treats you like a normal person who can get cold, sick, lost, hungry, overloaded, and absolutely wrecked if you leave town unprepared. The whole rhythm still revolves around checking your gear, packing food, watching the weather, carrying your backpack like it actually matters, and walking into danger without any fast travel or magic map telling you where you are. The sequel is also doubling down on the rough edges that made the first game memorable in the first place. Skills are more limited, so builds should feel more deliberate, and the combat is being pushed into clearer roles, whether you want to play with weapons, ranged traps, or magic built around sigils. Co-op is still a big part of the identity too, including online play and split screen, and that already fits the chaos the series is known for. Even the recent playtest notes were very on brand, warning that another player can drag you into an area that is too hard, make you spawn into an ambush, or even walk off with your backpack. That sounds exactly like Outward. Release window is third quarter 2026 for PC, while official console details have not been confirmed yet, though they will likely come later. The Relic First Guardian has had a quiet but interesting run into 2026, and the freshest news is that it slipped from May to later this summer. The game itself is built around a corrupted land called Arsiltis, where you are piecing broken memories back together while moving through a semi-open world shaped by Asian folklore, ruined places, and a long list of boss fights. The number attached to that list is already kind of ridiculous, with more than 70 bosses standing between you and the end of the road. Combat is one of the cleaner hooks here. Rhythm and melee flow seem to be the core of it, with less focus on raw level grinding and more on timing, pressure, and finding your own style. It ends up feeling like a different kind of dark fantasy action RPG, where the conversation does not immediately go straight to stats and farming. Story also seems to matter more than usual for this kind of game, with dozens of personal tales scattered across the world as you rebuild what was shattered. Echoes of Aincrad is doing something Sword Art Online games usually avoid, letting you build your own avatar instead of chaining the whole experience to Kirito from start to finish. You are still trapped inside Aincrad with thousands of other players, still climbing a floating death trap floor by floor, but now the game leans much harder into action RPG systems, stat growth, gear upgrades, and partner control. The partner side looks especially important. Fights run on a switch system where you and your AI companion can rotate roles, chain attacks together, split damage, and trigger special skills based on timing and commands. So the combat is not just about mashing through anime nostalgia. The world itself is broader than I expected too, with cities, planes, dungeons, side quests, rare treasure hunts, and more map opening up as the story moves higher through Aincrad. One of the harsher ideas in this title is the death game mode, where one death can erase your entire progress and throw you back to the start. Echoes of Aincrad is planned for July 10th on PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. I got into the public beta for Mistfall Hunter last September, and honestly, the movement animations and the general feel of combat were pretty rough back then. So, my first impression was not very positive. The newer footage looks more confident, and the developers say they spent the time since those tests reworking combat, class balance, movement, and parry timing. It is a dark fantasy extraction RPG, where you push into dangerous ruined zones, fight monsters and other players, grab gear, and then try to make it back out alive with whatever you found. You cannot just run to an exit whenever you want. First, you need to find and kill a rare creature somewhere on the map, and only after that do you get a chance to extract with your loot. If you die before that, everything you were carrying is gone. Since the last round of tests, the team has also been adding a new class, a new map with more open exploration, map-specific events, and more class reworks after player feedback. Mistfall Hunter is set to release in July 2026 on PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. And for the old-school crowd, Gothic 1 Remake. The whole setup still has that dirty, mean little RPG energy that made the original impossible to confuse with anything else. You are not walking in as a glowing chosen hero. You are just another prisoner thrown into the colony, a brutal mining hell trapped under the barrier while everyone around you is busy working, sleeping, eating, fighting, scheming, and trying to survive one more day. That living world is still a huge part of the appeal, and the remake is keeping the three-faction structure too, so your camp choice keeps shaping how the run develops. The place itself still matters as much as the quests. Valley of Mines is meant to feel organic and reactive, with people moving through routines and trouble spreading through the colony whether you are ready for it or not. The bigger change is in the combat, which is being rebuilt into something more fluid and modern, while still carrying that old Gothic backbone, while the whole colony also gets a full visual overhaul on Unreal Engine 5, and the remake launches on June 5 across all major platforms. Drop a comment and tell me which of these new fantasy games you're most excited for right now. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like because it makes a real difference for the channel. And if you have not subscribed yet, now is the perfect time because there is always more coverage of the biggest upcoming games.